In 2014, the NBA watched something wild happen. A player almost nobody cared about suddenly turned into a superstar in just one night because Kawhi Leonard wasn't a big name at all. Most teams saw a quiet rebounder with huge hands, not a future star. He even sweat through his suit during a pre-draft interview, and when the Spurs traded for him, neither their fans nor their coach thought it was a great idea. But then came Game 3 of the 2014 NBA Finals. Kawhi dropped 29 points, shut down LeBron James, forcing him into a finals record 7 turnovers. In one game, this nobody became the hero who swung the entire championship. But Kawhi's story doesn't end here, because the same player who shocked the world that night would one day face something he couldn't outplay. So, how did one game create an NBA legend? And what happened that changed everything? Well, to find out, let's go back to June 10th, 2014. After failing to capitalize on a commanding 3-2 lead in last year's finals, thanks to one of the most iconic clutch shots in the history of the league,
Long go, rebound pass, back out to Allen, his three-pointer, bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining!
which let the 2013 title slip right out of their fingertips, the San Antonio Spurs were desperately seeking revenge in the 2014 finals. However, with Miami stealing a victory during Game 2, removing the Spurs' home court advantage, the Heat now have the potential in Game 3 to grab a lead and then in their following battle, essentially bury San Antonio where no one has ever come back from. But not if the Spurs' fourth option, third-year player Kawhi Leonard could have anything to say about it. But wait, who is Kawhi Leonard? Why is the fourth option on a team so important? And how is he playing such a vital role for a championship squad so early in his career? Well, to find that out, let's quickly wind the clock back 3 years. I'll be quick. Entering the NBA out of San Diego State, Kawhi was a very raw prospect. While scouts loved his intangibles, such as his 7'3" wingspan, massive hands, and athletic skills, coaches and GMs were doubtful about the other side of Leonard's game.
What people say about me, say I can't shoot the ball, handle suspect, so I'm just working on my handles and just being confident in shooting the ball, even when I miss it, just being confident at the next shot to make the next one and keep moving on forward.
To make matters worse for the rookie, his introverted nature made teams question if he could lead. In fact, Kawhi was so nervous during his draft interview with the Phoenix Suns that he sweat through his suit, leading their general manager, Lance Banks, to cross his name off their list. But Chip England, the San Antonio Spurs shooting coach, was in Chicago attending the draft combine when he caught a quick 10-minute glimpse of the San Diego Aztec playing, making England realize all the issues Kawhi had, he could fix. The simple fact that Leonard, who was banned from scrimmaging at the combine due to his lottery pick status, loved the game so much that he snuck on the court to hoop, said everything Chip needed to know about Kawhi. However, the Spurs head coach, Gregg Popovich, simply viewed the 20-year-old as a big guy who could rebound, nothing less and nothing more. Yet, knowing their core of Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker were nearing the end of their careers, the franchise had to make a move in an attempt to extend their championship window. So they did.
With the 15th pick in the 2011 NBA Draft, the Indiana Pacers select Kawhi Leonard from San Diego State University,
trading veteran guard George Hill to Indiana in exchange for this big guy who rebounds. A decision, however, that angered Spurs fans. The franchise never made moves like this. They were elite at finding talent where no one thought talent could be found, not trading up in the draft and taking risks. But the decision had been made, and Coach Popovich got to work at molding his new rookie.
He was coming into his own. When he first came, I can remember talking to him and saying, we're going to concentrate on your defense. He worked before practice, after practice, with Chip England, with Chad Forcier and those guys, and everything they gave him he just sucked it up.
To everyone, except Chip England's surprise, Kawhi hit the ground running. Before anyone knew it, he was already in their starting lineup, a solid contributor, putting in a career high of 24 against the Blazers and assisting them on their journey to the Western Conference Finals. But it was in this round where Leonard's offensive struggles shined, because he would score 18 points in Game 2, only to follow it up with just 2 points, then avenge that failure with 17, only to then shoot just 27% as the Oklahoma City Thunder eliminated the Spurs 4-2. While Kawhi would begin to take the leap Coach Pop hoped he would, turning into, as he put it, Bruce Bowen, the former Spurs defensive specialist times 100, San Antonio lacked the discipline to get it done in 2013, which brings us back to June 10th, 2014.
And that's one thing Pop wants. He wants Kawhi Leonard to be aggressive on the offensive end.
Having averaged just 9 points in their first 2 battles, San Antonio simply wasn't going to be able to spoil the Heat's three-peat dreams without Leonard scoring.
Leonard again aggressive. Count it and one in this series and for much of the playoffs. Leonard again shooting and nails the three-pointer. Wild pass out to Mills. Patty Mills finding Leonard in the corner. That's a three! Kawhi Leonard. Most points he's ever scored in any quarter in his brief career, and it's in Game 3 of the Finals.
After almost matching his total from the first 2 battles in just a single quarter, Leonard kept his foot on the gas.
Leonard gets it back, fakes the three. James closes out on him. Leonard shoots and hits. Kawhi Leonard, 6 for 6 from the field. He's got 18 points.
In fact, by the time the first half had finished, the Spurs had set an NBA record.
I don't think we'll ever shoot 76% in a half ever again.
Yet, this wasn't even the craziest part, because while Kawhi just kept scoring, he was doing all of this whilst having to defend one of the greatest players of all time, LeBron James.
Boy, did he make LeBron work. The best thing that any defensive player can do is guard without help. But the best defenders are the ones that they don't stop the other guy, they just make them work really hard to score. And Kawhi made LeBron work really hard to score,
forcing James into an NBA Finals record 7 turnovers. With Leonard's 29-point night, the Spurs were now ahead 2-1, but could they stop the Heat from tying the series in Game 4? June 12, 2014.
Contact and finish.
Mills, not that time. Leonard on the follow.
San Antonio, after their massive Game 3 victory, simply kept rolling.
Versus the Spurs, any little minor mistake that you make, they will make you pay.
Heading back to Texas with a series lead no team had ever come back from in the finals, 3-1. But the Spurs knew the job wasn't finished.
Last year, we're 30 seconds away, we have it in the bag, and it slips out of our fingers. It's not over till it's over. Our goal right now is just to win one more game.
A point that LeBron James and his Heat made quickly, getting out to a 16-point lead in just 7 minutes of play.
Just remember, we have to do this together. The great part is we got all night long to take care of a bad start.
With San Antonio opening their second half with a beautiful Kawhi lob, the first domino in what would become a championship-winning 24 minutes, the Spurs had done it.
It's a good feeling. Oh my God.
Oh my God. That's what it's a crazy feeling. That's what it's about, baby, right? Yeah. You earned it. You earned it.
And Leonard, at just 22 years old, was crowned as the Finals MVP. So, could the Spurs, who had won 5 championships now since 1999, finally, for the first time, defend their crown? Or was this their final jewel? As the 2014-2015 season progressed, the Spurs faced a range of injury woes to everyone on their squad. In fact, it wasn't until February 4th, 2015, 49 games into the season, that San Antonio finally had a fully healthy roster. However, that wasn't their only challenge, because Coach Pop had made a massive shift in how San Antonio operated, giving his 2015 Defensive Player of the Year, Kawhi Leonard, the keys to their offense. While the Finals MVP had some teething issues, shooting a worse percentage due to the added responsibility, as their first-round playoff series approached versus the Los Angeles Clippers, Leonard would get his first real test as the franchise player. But was he ready? April 24th, 2015.
Green throws it up and Leonard throws it down.
With the now 23-year-old doing absolutely everything from forcing defensive stops to knocking down vital mid-range jumpers,
Leonard Turn around. Got it to go.
And providing valuable floor spacing, Leonard had not only scored a career high, but propelled his squad to a 2-1 series lead. However, this is where cracks started to show. May 2nd, 2015, Game 7, win or go home. 8.8 seconds remain, and all San Antonio has to do is get one more defensive stop and this game goes to overtime. But how did we even get here? Well, over the past 2 battles, Kawhi has struggled, shooting just 25% from the field, 16% from 3, and only averaging 15.5 points, resulting in the Spurs having failed to move past Los Angeles. Mishaps which only continued in Game 7. While the former Finals MVP would find the bottom of the net here and there, 13 points in an elimination game when a franchise is relying on your production simply wasn't good enough. However, the great thing about being the Defensive Player of the Year is you can still impact winning without scoring, and that was the Spurs' exact goal on this final possession.
Green by Paul, and God, he got it! 1 second left! Clippers by 2!
Yet, Chris Paul had left them a full second, plenty of time to get any type of shot off to either send the game into an extra period or propel San Antonio into the second round.
G out to inbound, now they got Jordan in front of him. Inside, Leonard knocked away Barnes! The defending champions have fallen!
Angered by his failures and knowing full well the whole Spurs franchise relied upon him to push them back into title contention, Leonard did what he had always done, locked himself in the gym, and by opening night for the 2015-2016 season, Kawhi was excited to show everyone his insane growth, starting this new campaign highlighting his hugely improved jumper whilst continuing to punish defenses with his wide array of scoring talents. Kawhi's 32-point statement plus the continuation of his elite defense made easy by his intense motor, 7'3" wingspan, and giant hands not only saw Leonard win back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards, but finish second in MVP voting and his Spurs grabbing the second seed in the Western Conference. However, after pushing San Antonio past the Memphis Grizzlies with ease as Game 3 began in their second round series against Kevin Durant and his Thunder at Oklahoma City, the Spurs were in serious danger. Lose these next 2 games on the road and return for Game 5 down 3-1. Therefore, their robotic small forward knew what he had to do.
Leonard able to save it. Leonard for 3. Leonard inside! Westbrook lost it again. Picked up by Leonard. Durant in pursuit. Leonard gets away, stumbles, but able to recover.
Kawhi's crucial 11 rebounds, clutch free throws, and 31 points was exactly what the Spurs needed to win Game 3. But Kevin Durant was hellbent on returning to the NBA Finals. Nothing, and I mean nothing, not even the Defensive Player of the Year could stop KD. 41 points in Game 4 and 37 in the series-ending Game 6 saw San Antonio once again eliminated far short of their own championship dreams. Yet, Kawhi had clearly leveled up. No longer was he just a defensive player. Instead, arguably, he was the game's best two-way athlete, an individual capable of carrying a franchise by doing literally everything on court. The crazy part, another offseason only saw Leonard add more and more to his bag, and what was about to happen in their 2016-2017 campaign would truly shock everyone. July 12, 2016.
The breaking news this morning, one of the greatest players in NBA history, Tim Duncan, has announced he is done. He is retiring.
With the departure of the man who had guided San Antonio to 5 titles since the 1999 season, the future of the franchise was now clearly in the hands of the man people were calling the Claw, a player who would go absolutely nuclear during the 2016-17 season, dropping 30 or more points 26 times, guiding his squad to 61 wins, the second seed in the Western Conference, and showing that he was truly becoming one of the most unstoppable players in the whole league. A point that, as the playoffs progressed, that he kept proving, dismantling the Memphis Grizzlies with a 31.2 point average and a playoff career high of 43 in Game 4 before facing off against the Houston Rockets. However, it was in this series where the Spurs' title hopes took a tragic turn. With the loss of four-time champion point guard Tony Parker in Game 2 to a quad injury and Kawhi injuring his ankle in Game 5, San Antonio was battered and bruised. Despite the squad moving past Houston in their sixth battle without Kawhi or Parker, their next opponent, the Golden State Warriors, who had added Kevin Durant over the offseason, were next. Yet, knowing this season might be his best chance at winning his second trophy, Kawhi suited up for Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, and what followed started one of the craziest butterfly effects in the history of the NBA. May 14th, 2017. Facing off against the far and away favorites, Kawhi and his underdog Spurs simply didn't care. With or without Tony Parker was irrelevant because Leonard was simply too good. Nothing Golden State threw at him could slow Kawhi down, and he was truly starting to look eerily similar to the man he used to obsessively study, guiding his squad to hold a 23-point lead at the start of the third quarter until
Leonard fires from the corner. And Leonard goes down again. And he's in pain again in front of the Spurs bench.
And we're up 23 points in the third quarter against Golden State. And Kawhi goes down like that. And you want to know if our chances are less, and you want to know how we feel? That's how we feel. Who gives a damn about what his intent was? You ever hear of manslaughter? You still go to jail, I think, when you're texting and you end up killing somebody, but you might not have intended to do that. All I care is what I saw.
With the Spurs centerpiece ruled out for the remainder of the season, Golden State would breeze past the battered and bruised franchise all the way to the 2017 title. However, at this stage, it was assumed both Parker and Leonard would return for the 2017-18 season healthy, and San Antonio would continue their ascent back to the mountaintop. In fact, analysts began making their predictions for the new season, not knowing what was about to happen next.
Who wins the MVP award, Jeff?
I'm going with Kawhi Leonard.
Because, as Kawhi expectedly sat out the start of the season, no one batted an eye. However, as month after month flew past and Leonard was still on the Spurs injury list, questions started to be raised. What was actually wrong with the claw? He just had a sprained ankle, right? Or is it now his quad, his knee? What's wrong? Then the news hit.
Apparently, Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs now have a strained relationship.
I hate to say this. Kawhi Leonard wants out of San Antonio.
Like, he was just fed up, tired, man. Wanted, you know, something new.
I think his uncle had a lot of what to do with what was going on off the
influence.
Court.
Yeah,
a lot of influence with it, and I think once his uncle saw some distasteful things in his mind, it was like, all right, we're not doing this. You know, we're not gonna. Because, you know, San Antonio, they don't treat anybody like superstars. And I think his uncle kind of, and rightfully so.
Right. Only 3 people for a long time.
You know what I'm saying? Rightfully so. He should have been treated like a superstar.
Kawhi Leonard would only appear in 9 games all year, his actions making it blatantly clear to San Antonio that he no longer wanted to represent their franchise. Therefore, the Spurs obliged his request.
The deal is final. The Spurs will send Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green to the Raptors for DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a 2019 first-round pick, league sources tell me.
A move that was met with huge anger from Raptor fans.
This makes no sense to me because basically you gave up, granted, he's not, DeMar DeRozan is not a superstar. Okay, he's a fringe star player, but you gave him up for basically a rental. Kawhi's not resigning.
I was told he's not too thrilled with this move, but he's a professional. I expect him to eventually hit up there and be there for camp, but this is going to be something where the Raptors are going to have to kind of have like a peace meeting and try to welcome him into the franchise.
Because not only had they just fired their Coach of the Year winning leader, Dwayne Casey, and replaced him with an assistant,
the Toronto Raptors have found their man, promoting assistant Nick Nurse to become the franchise's next head coach, according to ESPN.
But they had traded away the star who Toronto fans had watched grow up right in front of their eyes, DeMar DeRozan, for a player who was going to be a free agent at the end of the year. To make matters worse for the Raptors, Kawhi didn't exactly arrive healthy. The issues with his body were allegedly terminal, problems that were degenerative and had no solutions. Therefore, the Raptors invented two words that every NBA fan hates to hear: load management. Leonard would specifically sit out chosen games, allowing his body time to recover to ensure his health for the end of the season. If this was going to be a one-year rental, Toronto wanted to ensure it ended with the Larry O'Brien Trophy, but things weren't exactly going as intended. Players on their roster resented the franchise for the move they made, and with other top teams in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks and Philadelphia 76ers upgrading their rosters at the trade deadline, Toronto's title hopes were fading further and further away. So, Raptors GM Masai Ujiri got to work.
Toronto is finalizing a trade to secure Marc Gasol.
A decision which seemingly fixed everything. The passing talents of big man Marc Gasol unclogged their offense, resulting in Leonard doing some insane things. From setting brand new career highs, 45 points in a single game, averaging 7.6 rebounds.
I mean, Boardman does get paid in NBA as well.
And hitting game winners.
They'll play two-man game here. Lillard gets switched on to him. Kawhi for the win. Oh, what a roll! Kawhi! Clutch! No timeout, no timeout. And that's the ball game!
Toronto was proving all their doubters wrong. The Raptors would then begin their title journey against the Orlando Magic, a series that would provide vital lessons.
Just from the start of playoffs, we lost to Orlando Magic. Somebody had a game winner, DJ Augustine. And, you know, just from there, how we bounced back, won four straight. And then, you know, I feel like we just played through adversity this whole time, throughout the whole playoffs. Going to, Philly next, and we're down 2-1.
May 5th, 2019. Despite scoring a playoff career high of 45 points in Game 1, Toronto found themselves down 2-1, and given they were playing on the road, a Philadelphia 3-1 series lead seemed likely. But head coach Nick Nurse had made some key adjustments. Backup big Serge Ibaka had his minutes doubled, a move made to combat the domination from 76ers star Joel Embiid, who had scored 33 in Game 3, but on this night would only add 11. Combine this smart move with Kawhi turning into prime Michael Jordan.
Leonard into the paint, great fake. Leonard, boy, he made that look easy.
Well,
was he doing a drill?
Embiid
switches, fires a long one. Nothing but net. Kawhi not.
Adding in 39 points, Toronto had crucially tied the series. But with the two franchises exchanging wins over their next two battles, it all came down to this: Game 7, win or go home. However, this time around, 39 points from Kawhi just wasn't enough. The game was tied with 3.8 seconds remaining, giving the Raptors one final chance to propel themselves into the Eastern Conference Finals.
Sended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
However, despite hitting arguably the craziest playoff game winner in NBA history, their Eastern Conference Finals battle was heading in the wrong direction. The final buzzer in Game 2 indicating the massive hole the Raptors were going to have to climb out of in order to enter their first NBA Finals.
Where do you go from here?
I'm going to Toronto, Game 3.
But once again, Nick Nurse would make some adjustments to how they were guarding Bucks superstar Giannis Antetokounmpo. Kawhi Leonard was now his primary matchup, a decision that saw the Greek star only manage to score 12 points in Game 3, and with the Claw adding in 36, 10 of which he scored in overtime, Toronto had saved themselves from an impossible deficit. Yet what followed, no one expected. Because the Raptors' Game 3 victory wasn't a fluke. They would go on, despite Leonard playing through constant pain, to not only defeat Milwaukee, but do so without losing another battle.
It's all about the journey. You know, what you guys do to get to this point, and you know, how much fun you had just being able to play at this level.
However, now entering the franchise's debut final round, nobody believed in them.
I'm going to start with you. Toronto versus the Golden State Warriors. Who you got?
The Warriors in 6.
Their rival, the Golden State Warriors' championship pedigree, having won the last 2, was going to be difficult to overcome. To make matters worse, a Game 2 loss at home only saw analysts place further doubt on the Raptors' chances.
That really put a dent in their confidence. When you waste a game like this, that Kawhi Leonard goes off for 34 points, 14 rebounds, you lose this game. Now you got to go on the road in Golden State where they're as tough as anybody in the NBA.
So, Nick Nurse, knowing full well how difficult winning in Golden State was going to be, tried to motivate his team, telling his squad, let's just try to get one, to which his superstar replied,
Kawhi said, expletive that, let's go get them both.
Game 3.
Leonard gets away from Bell, and throws it down with a foul. Leonard for 3, knocks it down. Leonard, no hesitation, line drive is Kirk, Kawhi Leonard.
The Warriors got to help Steph Curry. He's too small to defend Kawhi Leonard.
A 30-point effort, which rolled into a 36-point night in Game 4 that saw Kawhi's goal of getting both be achieved. Now, all they needed to do was win one more, and with Game 5 being played back home in Toronto, this was their chance to win Canada's first NBA championship in front of their faithful home fans. But not if Kevin Durant could have anything to say about it. After missing most of the Western Conference and NBA Finals due to a calf strain, Durant was medically cleared and ready for Game 5, with Golden State and KD both being on the receiving end of 3-1 comebacks. KD's return truly breathed hope into Warriors fans' hearts. Plus, his easy re-emergence, knocking down 3 threes as if he had never left, saw the Larry O'Brien trophy start to slip out of Toronto's hands. Until...
Ibaka trying to stay with Durant, knocks it away, and Durant slipping. Durant goes down holding his leg. Ibaka goes up and is fouled down the other end. And Durant grabbing that right leg.
With KD's season coming to an abrupt end due to an Achilles tear, the title hopes swung quickly back in favor of Toronto. However, the Warriors, fueled to avenge the loss of their teammate, refused to see their crown be handed over. They battled and fought, stealing a crucial victory and forcing Game 6 back on their home court. But things just kept getting worse for the Warriors. Klay Thompson's season-ending knee injury, coupled with every Raptor contributing, Kawhi with 22, Kyle Lowry, Pascal Siakam, and Drake adding 26 each, the Raptors had made history.
There's a new NBA champion, and it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions. The Raptors, the 2019 NBA champs.
And our MVP, following an iconic buzzer beater and a dominant performance in the finals, your 2019 Bill Russell Finals MVP is Kawhi Leonard.
So, now a free agent, would Kawhi remain in Toronto, or would he head back to where everything began?
Breaking news, Kawhi watch appears to be over. Reports that the former Raptors player, a playoff MVP, has signed with the Los Angeles Clippers.
What did the Clippers do so right that convinced Kawhi Leonard to sign with them?
Well, they traded for Paul George tonight, and they are sending to Oklahoma City essentially a record collection of draft picks, 4 first-round picks, 4 unprotected future first-round picks, a protected future first-round pick, 2 pick swaps, and outstanding rookie point guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari for Paul George.
A move that sent shockwaves through the NBA. The Los Angeles Clippers were now the clear title favorites.
By the way, who do you think's going to win the West this year?
Clippers.
Clippers over the Lakers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's going to be a tough series.
And current Clipper guard, Patrick Beverley, would go on to let Steph Curry know that the next 5 years belong to him. Because Kawhi's opening night performance against LeBron James and his Los Angeles Lakers showed everyone what to expect.
Shot clock down to 5. Leonard.
Seems like he is always on balance.
3 of 5, 9 points. Got the screen, works in on Caldwell Pope.
This dude, man. The Patrick Beverley. Uh-oh, backhand.
Here comes Howard. He did it with the left hand.
Leonard's 30-point night, which only continued as he averaged a career-best 27.1 points, leading his Clippers to hold the second seed in the West, only saw their title hopes rise further and further. But as the playoffs began, the Clippers faced heavy resistance. Because despite holding a 2-1 lead in their first round battle against the Dallas Mavericks, LA was in danger of allowing the lowly Mavs back in the series due to a 12-point fourth quarter deficit in Game 4. So Kawhi got to work, mounting an insane comeback, forcing the game into overtime, and with Marcus Morris tipping the ball in late, a 3-1 series lead seemed guaranteed until...
Doncic pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang! It's good! Doncic wins the game at the buzzer!
However, this incredible shot only served as motivation for Kawhi. His Clipper franchise needed their two-way megastar to play at his peak if they were to live up to the insane expectations placed on their squad. So, he put up 32 in Game 5 and then 33 in their 6th battle, performances that only continued as he delivered 23.8 points over their first 4 games during their second round series against the Denver Nuggets, placing them just 1 win away from the matchup everyone was waiting for.
The Los Angeles Lakers are back in the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2010 as they eliminate the Houston Rockets in 5 games.
However, this is where one of the most tragic falls from grace in NBA history began. September 15th, 2020, after failing in both Game 5 and 6 to move into the Western Conference Finals, LA had one final chance to do so. However, both Kawhi Leonard and superstar teammate Paul George
way off, hits the side of the backboard.
Failed. Leonard's 14 points was nowhere near enough, resulting in the Nuggets becoming the first franchise to ever come back from 2 3-1 series deficits in the same postseason.
We're talking about a 2-time MVP. We're talking about a 2-time champion who Max Kellerman has bloviated about being the best in the world. And what happens? You're up 3-1 in the second round, not the conference finals, in the second round against Denver, Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, not LeBron James. And in the second round, up 3-1, you blow a 3-1 lead. What do? You shoot 6 of 22 from the field. You shoot 1 for 11 in the second half. You didn't even get to the free throw line. Just an absolute positive choke job, period. Oh, it's just that simple.
But failures never seemed to slow the claw. He simply took ownership for the mistake, got back in the gym, and worked. But as the 2020-2021 season went on, Leonard's injury struggles weren't improving at all. In fact, it became clear that it was likely going to hinder him for the rest of his career, and without Kawhi, the Clippers only managed to secure the 4th seed in the West, setting up a first-round rematch from 2020. However, this time around, Dallas had matured and held the 3-2 lead after the buzzer sounded in Game 5. Once again, despite being lauded as the championship favorites, LA was about to come far short of those aspirations. Yet, not if Kawhi Leonard could have anything to say about it. Game 6.
Batum to Jackson, 5 to shoot. Reggie Jackson. Not that time. Leonard throws down the follow.
Despite having a somewhat quiet first half, only adding in 14, what would occur in the final 24 minutes shocked everyone.
Clippers, the lineup that they have on the floor, they have the ability. My goodness.
And the large hands of Kawhi Leonard grab that one. Leonard pull up. Got it. 17 third quarter points, 33 for the game. Matchup. 5 to shoot. Leonard, step back 3. Bang! Kawhi Leonard from downtown. There's the double. Batum back to Leonard. Shot clock at 6. Leonard, step back 3. Puts puts it in. He does it again.
Kawhi had not only matched his playoff career high of 45 points, but propelled his Clippers back into the win column, a feat he repeated in Game 7, setting up a second-round series versus the Utah Jazz. Yet, while Leonard had helped turn LA's fortunes around once again, what happened late in the fourth quarter during their Game 4 victory changed his career forever.
Starting with the LA Clippers, who announced Kawhi Leonard is not only out of tonight's pivotal Game 5 against the Jazz with a right knee sprain, is what they're calling it right now, but he is out indefinitely.
Diagnosed with a torn ACL, the two-time Finals MVP was ruled out for the whole 2021-2022 season, and while he returned healthy for their 2022-23 campaign, he seemingly followed the same script, dominating in the playoffs against the Phoenix Suns during their first-round battle, dropping 38 in Game 1 and 31 in Game 2 before everything came crashing down.
Brian, we have some breaking news here on NBA Today. According to our own Young Masuk, bringing Chiney Ogwumike into this conversation, Kawhi Leonard has been ruled out tonight. That is according to Om Young Masuk with a right knee sprain.
The Claw, when healthy, was one of, if not the best, two-way player in the NBA. The only issue, he rarely ever was. While us fans don't know for sure what is actually wrong with Kawhi, it's clear there's a serious issue with his body, because not only was he barely present during their first round series loss against the Dallas Mavericks in the 2023-2024 season, and struggled again in the following 2024-2025 playoffs as Denver moved past them in 7, but he is now facing foot and ankle problems. Since making the shocking move to play in his home state, Leonard has only appeared in 68% of their games, and without their superstar, the Clippers have struggled season after season. While we can't be sure what's in store for Kawhi Leonard, unless some miracle cure is found, it's likely more of the same story, which is tragic. And all we can pray for is that Leonard one day finds full health and we get one last run of watching the man many believe is a robot dominate the league once more.